We're entering our last panel discussion, I believe, led by Larry Richardson from Exchange Solutions. So give him a hand as he comes up, and I'll let him introduce his panel.
Great. I guess we can get the panel members to join on the stage, and then I'll let them introduce themselves, probably in terms of the best one. But Jacqueline, I think Dan has joined us as well. Dave. Great. Yeah. So one of the things that we really wanted to approach today was just we've had a whole year since probably we've kind of joined together in this format just to have another sort of opportunity to network. Education, I think, is always kind of one of the key components that we look for, and an opportunity to kind of influence, I think, in terms of just one another, in terms of the way we think, and as well in terms of how we want to approach sort of common problems and common challenges. I think, if I'm going to share a little bit in terms of sort of what I seen in terms of just having a fairly active role in the industry, and the value that this gathering brings to me and to personally into my organization professionally. I think that's key. And then I think I'm going to touch a little bit as well just on all the key areas I think that we've kind of leaned into over sort of the 2013-2014 season. And and I think my perspective has been fairly clear, is that when we first started, I think the mandate was fairly narrow, I guess, in terms of just what we were looking at. I mean, we were kind of called ourselves a prepaid industry group, and I think that kind of quickly expanded to, well, wait a minute, there's going to be other form factors and new technologies, so maybe prepaid is a little narrow, so let's add it to payments. And then it was like, well, wait a minute, but these devices that we call gift cards are now used not just to drive spend, but they're also part of loyalty programs and that of it. So now we got to look at not just prepaid and payments and mobile, but now we got to take into consideration sort of loyalty as an area of topic. So we kind of look at what we're doing as an association, and we're expanding, in terms of the things that we need to touch base on and take into consideration, are expanding greatly. And, all these things, although they may not be major areas of focus for us, they're all relevant to what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we have to always be aware of and take those into consideration. So, as well, maybe just in terms of some of the topics we spoke on, I mean, regulatory compliance, I mean, that was a big area of focus this year for our group. And, even I think even if I looked at my organization, I think that was kind of one of the main areas of value that we extracted from this. I mean, the cost to participate and to contribute to this industry was more than offset just by the savings and the insight and our ability as an organization to get a head start on something as simple as when the anti-spam legislation came into play and that of it. So regulatory compliance is always something we need to be aware of. And it's always something we need to kind of keep an eye out for. And I think it's an area of common interest and where we benefit to work together. Market trends, I think that's always something that's a big interest to me and to everybody here. I think that's something I'm going to really challenge Dan to talk a bit about, because the concept of coming together to share in terms of where your business is headed and where the market is headed is kind of that balance between sharing and we compete with one another in some sense. So the opportunities to kind of share information are large, but then the challenges of sharing information to gain in common learning is also a bit of a challenge. So, but I think that's still a key area that we've had a small emphasis on over the last few years. I think it's probably one that we would like to see a larger emphasis on. Fraud, we all see that in our business. We all are impacted on it. Probably for some of us, probably it's a little less impact than others, but it's just something we need to constantly be aware of, and especially as we move from plastic to digital and that end of it. So that was a big topic this year, and I think it still remains a relevant area of focus for our group. Technology and technology innovation. I like where that's gone over the last 12 months. I think last year and the year before, I think our group focused more on the technology itself and the innovation, and I saw a lot more discussion now around consumer adoption and perception of those technologies, and how do we work together to ensure that the ways in which we start to move, our solutions are considered safe, secure, and protected for the common customer we're chasing. And then, a couple of other areas that we haven't really focused too much on, but I'd like to see is around economics. A lot of people are really saying to go to the next level, there's a stepped investment. Is there somebody here that can help me understand, not necessarily share their economics, but help me understand what are the 4 or 5 rows or columns in my spreadsheet that I'm missing that I need to put in there to make sure that I've got the right information to support decision making in my organization. So I think there's that kind of I've heard that as a common theme over the last few days as well, about help my organization to make the next step towards taking us to the next level. And then retail was the other side of the equation. It's something that we've also really pushed for in terms of a lot more retail participation in the group this year. And when we take a step back, I think there's a lot more retails at the events, but I think there's a lot more listening and maybe a lot less talking and driving the dialogue, and I think we'd like to see a lot more active participation from a retail perspective, because we heard the comment yesterday as well, which is like this, it's all well and good that we can we have new ideas, new technologies, new capabilities, and something the consumer wants, but the retailer plays that key last link to us delivering a lot of our products and services to the consumer from that side of it. So so we'd like to see a lot more influence in that of it. So so that's just kind of a rough areas of the topics we've had. And again, as we expand as an industry, and and the scope of what we have to consider gets larger, I mean, there's a risk of getting maybe a little bit too thin as an industry. So and maybe some of those topics that may be of interest to me are not relevant to your business, not of interest to you. So how do we start to reorganize or reset ourselves to say that, how do we become, get expertise in these areas without, ending up having a meeting a week, and each meeting is 8 hours long from that perspective. So how do we start to reorganize and restructure to do that? So anyways, so just thought I'd give you sort of a perspective, sort of how we've organized this year in the areas that we've hit upon. And Dave, maybe I'll start with you since you're the first in there. I'd like to sort of get a feel for sort of, again, what you've seen in terms of how we've reached sort of our mandate from last year, but more importantly, what you've heard in terms of maybe opportunities to reset or restructure the mandate for 2014-15. So, can you first by introducing yourself for those that don't know you in the audience? So.
Sure. Dave Hunt. You know me here from Payments Exchange primarily, but I actually have a full-time job as well with the Hunt Group and the giftcardgroup.com, and we're a fulfillment company, and we have a vested interest in the outcome of how prepaid and payments and engagement per se works in the industry. In 25 and a half years of fulfillment business and distribution, consider, the challenge we've had as a company going from 25 years ago where there wasn't even internet to a world where we have augmented reality shopping while you're walking down a street. I mean, it's nuts. It's changed completely. Now, obviously, not everyone's adopting all of those things, and it's exciting and it's disruptive. And the challenge from our business, and the reason that I've created this impotence to move people along, to herd a bunch of cats in the payments industry, is really to have a common voice to share. People who have never been to any of our events often say, community, yeah, of course, everybody's trying to build a community. And when you come and you drink the Kool-Aid, I think you understand that this is a little bit different than any trade organization. It's intended to be that way. It was never intended to be an association with a board of directors that wasn't nimble, can't move. It was also never intended that that I run an organization like this. That wasn't my intention. My intention was just to put up my hand and say, I care deeply, I'm passionate about it, so how can I help move my business along while at the same time partner with great people, like-minded, who are interested in moving their business along. So that became the creation of this, let's get together and build some value and continue to build that out. Now it's become 6 events a year. The question becomes, should it be 6 events a year? Some people say, well, let's just go for cocktails. Let's just have an annual event. But I mean, how many annual events are there? Just with this, we were competing with CMA, who overlapped. There was some sort of compliance payments thing going on up in Yorkville. There was the Montreal event. I mean, we had people flying in and out of here to attend or speak or what have you. So getting people's time is very difficult. Everyone is really, really busy. But at the end of the day, we all want something. We all need something. We need nurturing. We need to network. We need to build relationships. We can't always build them as effectively, I don't think, opposite a boardroom table or opposite a desk. It gives us an opportunity to meet regularly, to get to know one another. I mean, let's face it, you buy from people that you like. It's not all about technology or where they're from. If you like those people, you'll want to do business with them. So that's what this is about. It's about wanting to do business with people who are going to do a great job and make you look good. At the same time, it's about consumers, because at the end of the day, that is the most common thing that we share, because everybody has to have a consumer to buy one of our products or service. So in order to do that, we need to streamline and give a message, particularly on prepaid and gift, because in the industry, consumer doesn't really still get the fact that an open loop financial card or a network branded card or whatever, whatever we call it, a prepaid card, and we don't even call it one thing. The consumer thinks it's a gift card, and they don't understand necessarily why it works one way one time and another way another time. So we have some work to do. I think we have a mandate to educate the consumer, to educate the people that we're selling to. And that consumer also works as program managers, as fulfillment houses, as aggregators. And we also have to be careful, because we could blow ourselves up. There's a scary thing happening we're seeing in the marketplace right now called discounting. It scares the hell out of me, actually, because there's not a lot of revenue in gift cards from a selling or reselling perspective. And brands need to be careful to ensure that they're dealing with people who are reputable, who manage their brand properly, to make sure their cards are going where they're supposed to go, that their brands are being represented in the way that they're supposed to be represented, and that they're not heavily discounted every time somebody buys 10 cards. I mean, you, as a retailer or anyone who has a card, you're never going to discount somebody who's buying 50 cards. So why would you let your resellers do that? So I think you're never going to get that margin back, and it's devaluing brands, and I feel really, really strongly about that. And I think anybody who's in that business probably does too, but I think there's some awakenings that need to happen in how we conduct our business. So, I mean, I would love to play a part in influencing that, and part of it is called Payments Exchange. And again, it was really intended to bring us together. But now we're in our 3rd year, and who knew? Who knew that would be this much interest? I mean, who knew that we'd have some of the most influential retailers, program managers, all the network branded people, the largest players, the most considerable players in the business, as part of our ongoing routine of getting together, of sharing. It's wonderful. But everybody needs to get something out of it, and our needs are all different. But if we look at what our needs are, and the sort of convergence of technology and the convergence of data, all of these things, it's a blurred line. And when we hear sometimes, the mobile wallet was brilliant yesterday. Finally, somebody said, yeah, well, we kind of haven't figured it out yet. Yeah, there's 200 of them, and none of them are doing well. Is that good or bad? I'm not sure, but it confuses the consumer. And if the consumer is confused, they don't adopt. And if they don't adopt, we don't have jobs because we're not selling anything. So we have to make our message clear. So as an industry, I think there's an important opportunity to do that. So part of what we're doing is we're going to work with other organizations who are strong at things that will allow us to be scalable without having overhead. Obviously that makes sense because nobody wants to pay $30,000 a year to belong to an organization. But it also means that we need contribution, not just money, but time. People need to give of their time. And what does that mean? 3-4 hours a month would be wonderful, probably unrealistic, but it's really that amount of time. When you think about a meeting that you go to, that you spend an hour to prepare, an hour and a half to attend, and then have to follow up afterwards, that's one meeting. And you know, to Larry's point, there's things that fall out of content and the amazing talent that we've had present over the last couple of days. I mean, it's outstanding. I mean, just the value of getting a tip or learning about something or being introduced to someone who can change your business or move things along is incredible. So I think there's an enormous opportunity, but I can't decide that for everyone in the room. We need your input because this isn't about one person or one organization. It's really about a community and your constituents of this community. So if you want something from it, like everything, I think our parents taught us, if you want something, you've got to ask for it and you've got to work for it. Nothing's gonna, you can't just join something and expect something magically to happen and land in your lap. You don't work that way. So there's an opportunity to get involved, and we'd like to see more involvement and more people at the table.
I'm Jackie Shinfield, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a partner at Blake, Cassels and Graydon, and I practice in the payments area, and I have for quite a while. And just from a personal perspective in terms of prepaid cards and stored value cards, we at Blake's worked on the Blockbuster prepaid card, which was the first prepaid card, really gift card ever issued in Canada. And we were dealing with things like, are you taking deposits? Like, you know, back to that rudimentary level of legal analysis of what is this actual animal. And so we did the very first one. And then in terms of reloadable cards, there was a company called eCount, who's subsequently been purchased by Citibank, and they were the first reloadable issuer in Canada that had network branded cards, and they came to us as well, and I worked on that program. And when they called me, to be honest and embarrassingly, I've lost track of when, and they said, so can you talk to me about the prepaid provincial regulations or the federal regulations you have in place? There were none. There were no regulations in place to deal with prepaid at all. And then Ontario introduced some sort of in September of one year, right before Christmas. And I remember going through those going, oh my God, is this going to apply to the product? But they were promotional products, so they didn't. So I've been involved in this since the day of, like since there was before law and there was just product. And in trying to figure out what regulations apply to these products because they don't fit neatly anywhere, and how do you treat them and what do you do from a consumer protection perspective and from a banking perspective. So I've been with this product and with this business since literally its inception in Canada. And so I have a good understanding of consumer protection issues, regulatory issues, you know, why things are evolving, why things are changing, which way we're going, which direction we're going. You know, the whole thing I talked about yesterday about treating customers fairly. I mean, I think that's huge for this industry because that's going to become sort of a subjective, objective standard. Is this a fair product when you're charging X for activation and X for maintenance and someone doesn't even think about their card for 4 months and then there's $2 left, right? So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that are going to get scrutinized. And as a business, for all of our businesses, it's really important to be able to be on top of where the regulations are going, be in a position where we can respond to them so that we can explain that, well, we charge maintenance fees because we have all these fees we have to pay, because these are the things that are happening in the background because of fraud prevention, because of the record keeping, because of all the systems that are implemented. You know, it's not a free card to us, and we have to be able to educate the regulators, to be able to tell them, you know, where things should go in this business so they can understand our business. We need someone to advocate for us and our business and our position. And the banks have the Canadian Bankers Association, so they have their own voice and their own sets of laws. But leaving the banks aside, we're sort of out there, and to the extent that we could come together as a group, respond to things as a group, you get much more credibility with regulators when you're coming and not representing one person or two people, but various players in the industry. Then you sort of have a voice that's more respected. You can stay on, you know, from my perspective, it's important for this group to stay on top of what's happening so that when new anti-money laundering laws are passed on prepaid cards, or when this code of conduct is passed, we're in a position that we can come together as a group and respond. And in my experience dealing with regulators, it's not just responding, it's explaining your product and how it works. Because you'd be incredibly surprised about how many people are out there drafting the laws and they don't understand your business and they don't understand your product. And in my experience, if you can go to them and explain that to them and explain to them how it works, you know, aside from egregious sorts of fees and the like, they will listen to you. But it's important to have the voice, and to have the voice sort of as a credible organization, and to have the voice speaking for groups of people and not just sort of one particular industry player. And I think you're well positioned for that because there's a voice of many involved here, and so it does, you know, gives rise to that. There's credibility. It's useful to stay on top of legal issues, because that's, at the end of the day, it's the legal issues. If things go the wrong way legally, that completely can shut down your business and your business model. So just important to stay on top of things and be informed.
Dan, did you want to?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Dan Horne. I am like Jackie. I've been around for a few years doing research I'm a research professor at Providence College in the States. I started doing gift card or gift certificate, gift voucher research in 1992. I've since done over 100 major studies in basically every market in the world, including several here in Canada. And you know, over that time, I've worked with organizations, and I worked with this organization specifically about doing different types of research. And that one of the things, you know, I'm up here today to talk about, you know, the informational needs of the group, because one thing we have to understand that when we're working with an organization, everybody here has different sort of needs, and you know, I would ask you to think about several things when you're deciding what type of information you need. First of all, you know, think about the purpose of the information, and basically, I think as an organization, because we have different, you know, Dave and Larry have talked about the use of information for decision-making purposes. Well, that's fine, but that's hard to do when you have a group of disparate interests. Here, where we have an organization, we're still thinking about research in terms of its ability to inform us about what's going on and to influence other people. And you know, whether those other people or those key constituents are your consumers, or they're your customers and suppliers, or they're government regulators, or they're, you know, internal parties. And you know, and a lot of this, what we do is selling inside. And so how can the group come together to create information that's valuable, that you can use it? Because, you know, I'm at the stage in my career where I really don't give a shit about doing research for research purposes. I want to do research that is used. And if it's not, and I challenge you, I can give you all a copy of the Journal of Marketing Research and not in marketing science, and I would be surprised if one out of the group could read it. It's very esoteric, it's very mathematically driven, and it's all theoretical. What's important to me at this point is being able to do research that you guys can take out into the field and say, this is what was going to happen. You know, my specialty is now, you know, I've gone from gift to you know, more payments, and it really is the adoption of innovation. And, you know, what are the things that drive adoption? And it boggles my mind to see things like presentations yesterday, you know, whether it's gift card or it's mobile wallet, where people forget the fundamentals, which are, it has to be easy to use, it has to be more useful useful than what is already out there, and people have to trust it. And if you don't have those three things, it doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter if it's augmented reality or something with a lot of bells and whistles. It's not going to get adopted, and it's worthless. We don't even have to talk about it anymore. So I would encourage people to think about the purpose of the research that they want to do, the scope of the research, because, you know, in an organization like this, do we do generic research about payments? Do we do research about gift? Do we do research about gift in motivation and incentive programs? I mean, you can get down to, drill down to a very, very specific level. The more we drill down, the more valuable it may be to the individual organization, but the less value it's going to have to the group as a whole. So that's something that we have to sort of deal with as well. And the final thing that I think you have to really care about is, what's the time frame? Are we looking at past behavior, or are we looking at prospective behavior? And, you know, we can sit and talk about Bitcoin, and, you know, and that's great, but the time frame on consumer adoption of a cryptocurrency is 3 to 5 years if everything works out. And, or are we talking about gift cards where the adoption period was 3 to 5 years ago? And there's sort of understanding what people actually do and how they live their lives is useful information. Asking people how they're going to project into the future, how they're going to live their lives, is very difficult, different animal, and very difficult to get our heads around. And that's why you see people, the projections that get made. You know, I read the research that comes out. You know, we're going to do project market size in 2017, 2018. Nobody knows what they're doing. No one has a clue about those numbers. They're just making them up. And that's the truth. And so many things can happen. Think about, can you predict what's going to happen next week in your own life? I mean, you get an idea, but there's going to be a lot of variation depending on whether you get sick, whether you get your kid gets a sore throat, whether, you know, something happens at work, somebody leaves, somebody comes in. There's all kinds of things that go on in our lives that make it difficult to predict the future. And predicting the future in a technology that's changing very quickly is really difficult, especially when we're talking 4 years out. So you have to decide, if that's the kind of research that would be helpful to you, then yes, we can do that. As an organization, we can come together and build some models and take some guesses about what's going to happen 4 years from now. That's perfectly doable, and it's actually pretty easy because, you know, you're just putting down some assumptions and you're building some models out, and you say, basically straight lines, and that's all good. If it's more important to know what's going to happen this year to your business, or more importantly probably next year, because of things like setting budgets and goals and targets, then that's a different model. Or is it what's happening right now? So 3 things: purpose, scope or domain, and time frame are really critical when we think about what are the informational needs of the group.
Yeah, I'm going to need to talk to you for about 10 minutes after this, because I'm already being asked for 2015 projections, you know, and that's being asked by my clients as well. So it's, you know, definitely, you know, when I look at sort of say the growth of the business that I'm managing, you know, I can see how I'm growing, but I have no idea, is that a peak? Am I about ready to plateau? How am I doing versus other retailers that are, you know, sort of like me in terms of just, you know, sort of their business? So am I growing, you know, at a larger rate than my competitors? Am I growing behind the market rate from that perspective, and therefore maybe potentially underachieving that perspective? I mean, that even just a sort of a baseline of information at that level sort of helps in terms of supporting that area. So, you know, one of the other things as well, and I think, you know, Jacqueline, you talked about this, the you know, the code of conduct coming up. One of the things that we've talked about, I think, over the last 2 years as well, is this, you know, there's a common starting point and almost an end point for all of our businesses, regardless of, you know, whether we're issuers, processors, resellers, retail merchants, and that's, you know, it's this concept of regulation, right? So, and you know, in a vacuum, as you said, you know, you've got regulators that are going to make up stuff without a real, you know, sort of clear understanding of our business and the economics around our business, and those will be proposed and that end of it. And if they're proposed in a vacuum, they're likely going to come pretty quickly to be imposed on our industry. So, one of the areas that we've talked about, we never really leaned into, was this concept of maybe it's a code of conduct, or maybe from that end of it, but it's also just just access to and influence to, to decision makers in our industry, just to sort of drive, or support their decisioning from that perspective, right? And I know, Dave, you had brought a few government regulators, I think, here in the past who've participated in that end of it, and just so they can kind of maybe listen and hear what what we're doing and how we're approaching that. But I mean, any ideas, Jacqueline, in terms of how we would maybe more formalize that over the next 12 months, and that, because they're talking and that end of it, and we're not influencing at this point.
We're not influencing. Well, there was for the code, for the consumer code, there was a comment period. So there was the ability to put in comments on sort of, they talked about principle-based regulation. So principle-based regulation, which is somewhat helpful because it doesn't drill down and it gives you the flexibility. To be more engaged with the regulators would have a cost component to it, because basically you get involved with lobbyists who know the right people, who talk to the right people, who just keep sort of whispering in their ear and what's doing on this, what's doing on that, and you sort of get your group known, and then you sort of stay on top of what's coming, and you can usually, if you get a lobbyist that's involved in working for you, when there's different parliamentary hearings on subjects that are of interest to you, you can usually get a voice there to speak for you, to answer questions, to explain how things work, to explain how systems work. Obviously, to do that would be a financial commitment to get that, but you can certainly do that, and you can start conversations now, or just keep conversations going. And there's someone who's in Parliament that has an ear to the ground and is listening for your issues. They're going to let you know, hey, we heard about this escheatment thing the federal government's thinking of doing, and you can be right in there quickly and early, and the people will know your issues, understand your business, and be able to make those submissions for you. So you certainly can. It's also helpful that when there are comments periods, whether it's on federal regulations, on the code of conduct for debit and credit industry, that you respond. And if you really don't have a lot to say, just because you agree with everything, let's take the best case scenario, then it's great to put in a letter on Payments Exchange letterhead that says, we've read this and we support it and we think it's great, and this is who we are, and this is what we do, and these are who our members are. So get your name, it's an organization out there as a voice, so that people will understand it, will see it, it'll become familiar, and then if there really is an issue, it won't be like, oh, who are these guys? Like, you'll be there and you'll be out there. So there's definitely ways of doing that, and a lot of the, the bigger banks and other organizations have people that have, that are working for them all the time on these exact types of issues.
And that also happened last year with the Ministry of Attorney General for Ontario, who you may know was looking at perhaps scraping unspent dollars from gift cards, which don't expire at all after 2 years. Their thoughts were, be a good idea. Well, we don't have any money, so why don't we take that money and we'll just put it in our bank account and look for the rightful owners that are anonymous. So that, of course, crept up last year, and we all, we all laugh and we shrug our shoulders and shake our heads and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. No one's going to do that. But of course, they've done it in the States, where they have federal laws and they have state laws, and they're all conflicting with one another, and they have a 5-year expiry in the U.S., and in, was it 3 states or 2 states, they're collecting money after 3 years. So now they're, the retailers have to make this money, this liability on their books, whole for the consumer. And just when you think it's not logical, it doesn't make sense. So, and again, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but we brought together 80 different companies. It started with a conference call, and actually spoke to the Ministry of Attorney General, the gentleman in charge, John Lee, and said, listen, we're an industry group, and you've asked for comment in 2 weeks. Leading into the summer holidays, kids are coming off school. That's not enough time. I didn't even know there was an industry organization. Oh, that's interesting. How long do you need? We got a 3-month extension from the government, and then responded. And when we responded, I would like to think that we had some influence with 80 brands behind us, some of which didn't want to submit themselves or put themselves in the spotlight, or maybe even did it on the back of the association, as opposed the association of everyone doing it as opposed to their brand doing it. And they passed on it. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to pass on it forever, because as we get to know who our customers are, there might be a relook at that. But if we're ahead of the game, there's an opportunity to influence. And if we're reacting to what's already in movement, we have a less chance of influence. It's just like planning in our own business. If you're in the plan and you're setting the plan and going all the way from plan to execution and how that will touch everyone, you're going to have a better result. You'll have better control of your costs. Everyone knows what's going on. So I think there's a real opportunity to do that. So part of that will be through an association we've now formed with NBPCA, which I mentioned yesterday, which is the network-branded prepaid card association, which doesn't roll off your tongue easily. And they're really the networks and the program managers in the U.S. There's complications that happen, of course, 50 states and feds, and lots of complications, lots of activity, lots of advocacy. So in principle, we've agreed that we will work together, that they will collaborate with us in Canada, and that we'll share resources and information, that they'll attend our regular gatherings and provide input, because there's not enough for them to create their association in Canada. So we're kind of this really interesting spot for everybody, because we all live, most of the business happens within the GTA, so we can get together. In the U.S., they live all over the place. So it gives us an opportunity to bring that knowledge together and be organized. So, some of those things we're going to do, I think it's important that we do with other people who are already in that business and already very good at it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for those that were still on their first cup of coffee yesterday morning, when Dave kind of did make that announcement around the NBPCA, and there's a good example of an organization that's got lots of experience in terms of their ability to be effective at educating, influencing sort of the decision makers prior to the decision being made. So, and I think the big thing for me last year when that event in Ontario came up, and that was that we reacted as an industry versus we were planned and prepared and maybe potentially had influenced from that event. So we kind of inserted ourselves politely into that meeting versus we were invited as a group that they knew represented a certain segment of the industry from that perspective. So I think that one's definitely something that we can do. And I think there was a discussion yesterday on social listening, which I thought was a good maybe addendum to that, which is maybe we challenge ourselves to maybe we're getting so broad as an industry, but maybe we challenge ourselves to say, once a year it's a good time to kind of reset our mandate, and then maybe if we agree on 6 or 7 core mandates, that we go off and form sort of almost subcommittee-like groups out of that that really focus on that area, and then everybody can participate in one or more of those subcommittees that are of interest and have an impact to their business and they want to influence and have it. And then on our sessions where we meet 5-6 times a year, maybe that one of those subcommittees is kind of the major focus of that event, and then maybe just a small little amount of reporting on status with the other ones and that of it. But sort of allowing more participation through sort of more focus on your participation with one of these areas, and that, whether it be fraud or, as we said, in terms of regulation, and that is something of interest to you that you want to be a participant in, there's an opportunity for you to participate in. And those things will have their own life cycles outside. If we only meet every 2 months, for example, it doesn't mean everything has to be put on hold. There's no reason why that subcommittee cannot still continue their cycles, whether it's something front and center they need to be on and discuss. They can continue to meet, whether that's every week, just until that peak goes away and that of it. But so I think the way we structure it, maybe potentially there's an opportunity for that as well. So. And again, probably one of the other things we did discuss is how do we get less ideas pushed out for consideration and more input from the broader association into it. So it would be good to hear from somebody else. I'm not sure if I'm going to get a volunteer or I'm just going to impose. I'm going to call out names because I know a few names in the audience, but it'd be interesting to hear from anybody who just said, like, just share in terms of something they got of value from one of the areas of focus this year, but something they think that the industry needs to kind of put additional emphasis on or new emphasis on going forward. So the hands are
stuck beside their bodies.
Let's start with the letter D for Don. Don, you want to put up your hand?
Don's always
Don has her hand up there, I sent it, but we don't, just like I said, just something that you extracted from one or more meetings and something that you would think would be an additional value to you and your business, or to the industry in general. So.
Oh, geez. Well, I think so first of all, just the coming together of the retailers and the vendors and all the different people in the industry, and learning and hearing and absorbing the different points of view. And I've actually sat over the past couple of years in a few different seats. So I've been on the vendor side, and then I've been on the client side or the retail side. So I think for me, that's helped me to be able to approach my business on a day-to-day basis with a more holistic view of the playing field. Definitely the regulatory component and just having a finger on the pulse of what's going on, and again, from different facets, so from different sides of the coin. And then I think the new, because we've become payments exchange, and the shift from prepaid onto payments has introduced discussions around things like the cryptocurrencies yesterday, and about loyalty and consumer engagement and social listening, and all of the other areas that impact payment, like the point of sale, that transaction point. There's a whole, I'm sure, as Kevin was alluding to earlier, there's a whole purchase path around that exists. And so learning more about that and seeing the perspective of the processors and the networks and the banks and the different players in that chain, that food chain, I think has been probably the most valuable. And lastly, I'll just say that the value that Gary has brought in terms of talking about mobile and how to approach payments through different channels and enhance your strategy to execute through different ways, that's probably been for me the most important. Yeah,
I got a note to for us to invest in a USB port in the back of Gary's brain, just so we can all plug in and download once in a while, just to extract some information from him. So, anybody else, kind of, whether you're new, I know Biotab fairly new to in the last 6 months. You want to talk just a bit about the value that you are looking for, the value you've already kind of extracted, and maybe what you'd be looking for in terms of focus on in the next 12 months. So.
Yeah, I think the payments exchange has been great. The big benefits, I would say, are the fact that you get to just talk to people. I feel like the industry is full of, there's a lot going on, and the partnerships aren't, it's not like someone's roofing someone's house and they just do that and go away. You're working with these people on a day-to-day basis, and it's good to reconnect with people you've seen in the past and people you're going to work with. And it's not so it's not so formal, right? So it ends up being great, and I think that's a big value that we've gotten out of it, is being able to not just sit against on the other side of a boardroom table with the people you're working with, but it's like, we're having beers after, and then you're hearing things that maybe they wouldn't share with you in a different context or a different environment. So that's been key. Just the regulatory stuff has been fantastic. Jacqueline does such a great job of just hitting the key points and keeping everyone just watching what's going on. And those are things that you can watch what's going on and be reactionary, but you can also see what's coming up and then plan your strategy against it. So all those things together make something like Payments Exchange a fantastic kind of community, I think.
Good. Yeah, Dan, and can you move your mic a little bit closer to you?
I just wondered if, sort of underlying all this is the idea is, can the exchange grow as it exists today. And because I think of two things that come with size. One is more people, as Matthias just said, to interact with, to develop more partnerships, et cetera. The other is to create a bigger media presence, so that when you go to the minister, they don't say, "Oh, I didn't know there was a payments exchange." So there has to be an awareness campaign, if you will. And the other thing is lobbyists. In paying lobbyists, paying for media, awareness. Somebody's got to do that. There are more resources if there are more people involved. So I wondered if the idea of growing the exchange is behind this, or is this just sort of we have a sort of tight-knit, stable group here, and that's where we want to stay.
Yeah, I mean it's a good point, right? I mean, I get the sense we're kind of at a bit of a tipping point. So I always get nervous when you kind of plateau, right? Because in my mind, there's no such thing as a steady state. You're either going to grow or you're going to decline from that perspective. And I'm just thinking through, where are we as an industry? So if we're going to continue to broaden our mandate and grow, how do we keep that sense of community and intimacy that we get through networking, right? So that'll be one of the challenges, because at some point in time, there's only so many challenges you can tackle. There's only so many areas you can address before you can't cover that no longer in a 2-hour sort of networking session, right, from that perspective. But good. Anybody else like to be quiet? I can continue to draw names then and talk. Retail-wise,
looking for a job?
Yeah.
We're hiring. Anyone looking for a job?
Yeah, my 18-year-old,
see me after.
My 18-year-old daughter needs a summer job. Seriously.
Carr, I'm sorry, but Jackie's daughter's looking for a... It's nothing personal, it's political, really.
I think I want her to have a job more than she wants to have a job is the problem, right?
I get that too.
Yeah. Good. So, I think retail-wise was one of the areas that, I continue to think that we're seeing, again, probably a lot of listening and not much influence and active participation. So I'm just wondering whether, from a retail perspective, I'm kind of trying to find a few here, but from a retail perspective, it'd be great to really understand, is this strictly, kind of a education in terms of the value I'm extracting from this, or are there other things that, I'm looking for that aren't necessarily being addressed or discussed? Or, is retail maybe a subcommittee on its own? Maybe that's an area where, there's a group of retailers that come together to talk about potentially, the items that are really kind of unique to their vertical that are being challenged on, and that event, and that provides maybe a little more of a safe environment. I know a couple of years ago, Dave, you had a retail segment to one of the conferences where it was sort of like, suppliers stop at the door, right? This is a retail safe zone from that perspective, where they could just kind of be a little more sharing of challenges, problems, and issues without, somebody putting on their sales hat and saying, well, I can convert your problem into my product solution and that end of it. So,
and I wasn't even permitted into that.
Yeah, you were the first guy that kept it. So they had one person there. So, yeah.
So I'm Yvette Bernard. I'm with Oxford Properties, so we're shopping centers.
Okay.
And I have gone to, so I'm responsible for digital strategy, primarily from the marketing side. So I've actually, it's probably my third payment type conference I've attended over the last year and a half. And I can tell you that, so we're not really quite a retailer, but we're also not on the other side, and we do have gift cards, and we do have someone who manages that for us. But what's really challenging, particularly for our senior management, is accepting where that line is drawn, particularly as it comes to regulatory, between payment and marketing information and privacy. So that's part of the reason why I come to a lot of these events, because from the marketing perspective, we understand privacy issues and we need opt-ins for email, for Facebook, and all that great stuff. But as we're trying to move to that next level of perhaps even putting our gift cards online or anything, any other product that we offer, once we start getting credit card information or other information, that puts us into a financial realm, and that's a whole other set of regulatory. So where is that line drawn, and where do you start? Do you start on the marketing side and then cross over, or vice versa? Yeah. So that's sort of why I come to these, and where I'm trying to decide in terms of strategically how to move forward.
Yeah, David, did you want to respond?
It's brilliant timing, because I think what we've learned in our transformation from being prepaid and gift to payments, and part of the challenge is payments too broad, and if it's so broad, then how can we keep everyone's interest and serve everyone in an equal way where they get the value out? But I think the challenge now, even within your own organizations, is that you have many people. It's not one person who does all of those things. It's many people. So you have digital strategies. You probably work with Jason on the prepaid side, and you work with other folks, maybe technology people, marketing people, finance people. And that's, I think, where the real opportunity to learn and share, because on the prepaid side, if you go and try to state your case from a merchant perspective, I think in many organizations it's a cost center. So depending on how you look at it, it's a cost of doing business. I mean, certainly for Oxford Properties, you don't have stores. This is a value. It's almost loyalty, almost to your as a landlord. But there's many people in your organization who can benefit by not just about prepaid, but about strategy, about location-based marketing, about all of these things that impact making decisions within your organization. And that's why I think it's important to broaden the scope of what we're doing, because it's not just any one given person at your table. So why should it just be one given person that attends here when there's just so much that overlaps that makes decisions? And we heard from the digital people yesterday, yeah, they're signing up lots of merchants. There's not a lot of adoption. But I mean, are we really expecting prepaid to drive digital strategies at a merchant that has thousands of locations? I don't think so. It's going to be other strategies that drive that mobile, digital engagement, loyalty, that's going to impact that. So I think this is a good forum to bring people together, because it helps them exchange information with other people and I mean, we're not unlike one another. We all have the same challenges. It just, we have different ways of approaching them.
Can I just say one thing, because the lawyer in me has to respond. But when you're a bank and a financial institution, a heavily regulated institution, whenever you're doing any product development, any advertising, compliance is at the table. And compliance is always at the table at the very beginning, because the last thing you want to do is have this great product, this great rollout, and then 10 minutes before, you're like, oh, well, you can't do that. You need to have this disclosure in bold font. Or you can't do that. You need to have a signature. Someone has to sign it. Or, well, if you're doing that and you're collecting information over the internet now, it's a whole different level of PCI compliance, and you need to use a service provider who's PCI compliant, or you're going to have to become PCI compliant. Like, the issues from a legal perspective are very large no matter what you're doing. So you're probably not in the bank mindset, but when you're rolling out products and services where you're taking people's money, you always have to have compliance and regulatory at day one, because what's going to happen is you're going to spend money on getting your systems, you're going to do document runs, you're going to do prints, you're going to do all these things, and then if you wait till the end for legal, sometimes it can completely topple everything. So put regulatory and compliance at the beginning in part of the planning, and that makes things much easier, and then you can level set expectations and go, oh, okay, well, we can issue these, are great, but we can only do it up to $100, because after that there's going to be this issue or that issue, as opposed to having this great product and then you have to keep drilling it down, and expectations are thrown off.
I work with compliance all the time, and once, and I don't know any other retailers that may be in here, because we have lots of retailers in our properties, but that has been the challenge, is everyone has these great ideas of doing these campaigns where we can then, get a button on there and sell it through and do all this, and it's like, okay, are we PCI compliant? No, all right, forget that. So I know that a lot has been said, it's in the hands of the retailers to assist with adoption, but the behind the scenes work and effort that has to be put in is tremendous. And it is not cost prohibitive. And that's part of the reason why we don't move forward with a lot of stuff. The ideas are endless, that's without a doubt. But once you bring in all that, the financial, the payment side, the onus of who's responsible, who's liable, all that great stuff, just makes all those lovely ideas seem like a faint memory.
I know, but that's why it's better to deal with it from the start as opposed to when you're well down the road in planning and you've input resources and expenses, right?
Paul, for me. Is this on?
Yep. We told them not to turn it on, don't worry.
Test? Okay. It goes in combination with what we've already been speaking about, which is we're not ever running out of good ideas. And what I find when I come here is I get a lot of great ideas on what other companies are doing. I liked the idea of RFID in a changing room, the music, great. I can probably think of ways that are different and which might work in my industry. But what we're missing, I think, in coming here is from start to finish, an idea into the execution. How do you execute on ideas? We're talking about regulation, we're talking about the challenges that we face in executing ideas. It would be great to go through a few industry ideas that have come to fruition and have had successful deployment and launch, and then to peel it apart step by step. Where did we start? How did we get there? What was the result? And maybe just one presentation on something that perhaps everyone has seen, not something as small as a retailer in Europe might have done this little execution, something that maybe we've all seen in Canada, that then we can say, great, I saw that, I understood it, it made sense. Now walk me through negative month 15. And walk me through, how did you get there? What did you do to deploy? What are the challenges you faced? Because that's where we come into a lot of challenges on going back to the business case, going back to the planning and the deployment and execution. So anyways, that's what I would like to see.
I'd love to see that too. I guess the challenge always is sharing. I mean, how much does one want to share? I think because this group's so intimate, and you saw the level of presenters over the last couple of days, they shared more than I've ever seen in any conference that I've been to, where sometimes they have to water it down based on their sponsorship dollar because they get to speak because they're a sponsor. But that is always a challenge, is sharing. I mean, we come together to share. It's part of the networking exchange. But I mean, I would see tremendous value in that, and I'd ask for anyone to step up to be able to, share that for the benefit of all. But it is a challenge to get somebody to do that, as much as it is for them to, they don't want to give away the secret, they don't want to air the dirty laundry, maybe they're not allowed to talk about it. How about ESSO?
Oh, well,
just saying.
Well, I guess part of it is that, and not for self-promotion, but Exchange Solutions as an example, we do a lot of things that companies might not even be aware of, and I'm sure that's the case with people that we would deem as competitors or kind of partial competitors, and maybe it would be a good forum to talk about what we've done, even if it's not specific promotion, but generally speaking, what we've done, how we did it, and then to maybe talk about companies that can do those sorts of things, because I think it's a bit of an education process for the merchants and the retailers that are here to educate them on probably what they couldn't do on their own and what other companies like Exchange Solutions and Biotab and so on, what they could do for the merchants beyond on what's seen on the surface.
So would the suggestion be to have like maybe a showcase that we include in some of our events, or some way of explaining? Because I have the same challenge, which is, people relate me to the payments exchange, and that's not what I do for a living. It's part of my community service, is what I refer to it as. But nobody knows. I've been in business for 25.5 years, and people don't know that we're a fulfillment company. It's kind of weird to me. Maybe I've done a bad job, or maybe just a good job keeping that away from this. But either way, I think there's an opportunity to promote without promoting, because then it becomes, we have to be careful, I think, to not be the place where you don't want to go because somebody's got to try and sell you something. So there's that careful line, but I think exchanging values of what your services are, I think are valuable. Even from a retail perspective, sharing. I mean, Bruce Hammer from Home Hardware has just joined the organization. Gina from Target, where is she? There she is at the back, has just joined. So it's going to come up regularly from Minneapolis to visit with us. But you know, we're getting traction, and I think it would be important to share their stories too, from a retail perspective, from a service provider perspective. I mean, that's the whole exchange of information is why we're here. So we need to structure it in a way that you're getting the benefit of it. And I'm happy to, I mean, it's an open door. It's about value for you, for all of us. So however we can deliver that, but we also need people to do that. I mean, we're gonna hire a dedicated party to work on payments exchange now. Kind of aided by an early departure, sorry for our loss, of Stephen. But that will allow us to, you know, kind of restructure that spot, which will help drive things, but we need other people. We need people, again, you want to get something out, you got to put something in. So you got to have a little skin in the game, and that might take some time. But I absolutely guarantee you, if you put in some time, it'll pay you back many times over. You just need to make the commitment. And we're talking about hours, you know, hours a month, maybe hours a year. But imagine if 100 people did hours a year, how much more we could get from this. But we need to make a commitment.
Yeah, I think that example you used, Paul, might be better. That might be something like if it was a kind of like a subcommittee, and it was retail focused, they might go off and create more of a mock example of going from, you know, the first digital execution, talking about the shared experiences and challenges and issues and benefits of that from their perspective, to almost create like a template or a roadmap, right, that everyone can take and say that's great learning. So anyways, I think we're kind of close to that time, so I'm not sure if we got exactly what we needed out of there, but we're just you know, trying the opportunity to talk just a bit about a reflection on what we were looking.
Yeah, and use members at paymentsexchange.ca, or my Hunt Group email, either one's fine. I've lots of domain aliases. But get in touch. If it's only to offer support, bring your team out. You know, these events aren't insubstantial in putting on. There's a lot of scale and effort and costs that go into doing this. Somebody has to pay for it. Although it's set up as a for-profit, it's only that way because we acquired it in about 3 hours from the UK to make it continue. And I don't think it would ever be large enough to be a not-for-profit. There's just not enough money going through it. It would cost more to manage it that way. So our commitment, my commitment, is it's self-sustaining. We need to put the money back in to grow it, and part of growing it, and part of the mandate of an advisory board that have been invited to participate personally is to bring their network, to bring their expertise, and to share their network to build a larger community. Because by nature, a community is nurturing, and it helps everyone else in the community. That's what a good community does. So in order to do that, what if we all brought 2 people each? Imagine what that would do, 2 people each. 2 people from your own team, for internal teams. We'd be, again, that knowledge, that experience that we're sharing, it would be that much better. So it's not difficult. We just have to find time, which is difficult, but we have to find just a little bit of time to say, hey, listen, I'm going to this event, and I'm happy to extend passes. I mean, everything can't be free. It doesn't work that way. Although I see some of these platforms, like Ripple's apparently free, and which is great. But something has to give. Something has to be paid for. But I'm happy to introduce people. I'm happy to, you know, kickstart that any way I can, to give passes, to bring people on your team. But let's get it done. Let's let's build this because it's important to all of us to have a good outcome. And I think we can really influence that. We're at a tipping point in our industry. I think we're at a tipping point with payments exchange to go to the next level.
Right, good. So we're running a little bit over, so I think we'll wrap it up. And plus, I looked a little bit ahead, and I noticed that there was the customary jugs of Bloody Caesars that were going to be served after we're done talking. So I guess we better stop talking. But I also noticed, Dave, you're going to do closing remarks. You're probably not going to pat yourself on the back to end the session, but maybe you could let me sort of just thank you. I know I've extract a lot of value my organization has, and I think my clients that I service have benefited from it as well. So I know I appreciate the efforts of you and your team. I know they're probably out there making Caesars right now as we speak. But
they're probably got the first jug.
But again, as always, sort of well organized. I think the content was about as strong as I've seen. In terms of some of the conferences, and as relevant and as bleeding edge as I've seen. We even saw examples of executions that were, oh, by the way, last week this was just launched. So it's great to kind of have that sort of real-time validation and feedback from the industry and the marketplace. So, but I know I appreciate your role and what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Why don't I quickly wrap from here? I've been busy making notes, and of course, I get a writer's cramp whenever Gary Schwartz is up here, and for the first time ever, I found somebody more quotable than him, and I can't believe it, with Asif Khan. Just the content delivery was incredible. The experts they really knew their stuff, and it was great sharing. So just some quotes to leave you with, and also to remind you, the awards are tonight. If you're not attending, the Hunt Group has a table that we've sponsored, and you would like to attend, you may as our guest. You're welcome to if you would see LA. She'll set you up. So if you're not already attending, it's here. This room will look completely different at 6:30. Champagne reception, live entertainment. Tripp will be departing early because he's shooting commercials in New York tomorrow. He has a real job, apparently, that he's going to do. And we have a new MC tonight, Maggie Cassels, who I'm sure will keep us all on our toes. And then we have a DJ afterwards. So we're going to play some oldies and some new ones that will make our heads hurt, I'm sure, and have a great time. So if you'd like to go, please see LA. Feeding the smart transaction. I'm just going to blurt them out because some of them are going to stick, maybe one or two. John Squire also said, looking at the phone, the device is the wallet, not the application. That's what consumers think. Interesting. Creating content, have your audience engaged. There was the hat trick of insights that Louis talked about. How it was all consistent, but the hat trick of insights. Amazing intention to use the prepaid card. It's a commitment by the consumer or by whomever is acquiring it. Focusing on the niche market to succeed, not just a single provider or solution, will prevail. I think we've all finally come to grips with that. It just needs to, it'll take its rightful form, and I guess the strong and the large and the well-funded and the well-organized will survive. 86% of all gift card purchases spend more than on their card, which I think Ted shared with us. We believe in an I will culture. Important advice from Mark DiPrato. Alignment is critical in everything we do. And that's part of what we do here, is try to align the business with your own business so we can do more business. Interact with people in a very human way. Location is the new cookie. I might use that one later after everyone's had a few drinks. Retail is made of pixels and bytes. Interesting how our landscape is changing. Social currency for products or product discounts. So exchanging value. It's become this, it doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin. I mean, from the beginning of time, we've traded something of value for something else of value. So it's interesting that now we're going to trade, take a picture of this and post it and I'll give you that for helping promote me. Interesting application. Bringing the store to them for seniors. So they can't go out and do it themselves, bring the store to them. So again, another application of technology and opportunity. Replacing physical chaos with mobile or virtual chaos, another Garyism. That's awesome. It's just more chaos, it's just different chaos. What's my data trail for the day? If data is used for good, it can be very helpful, Kevin reminded us. If it can be used, and we can use it for good. Data is a renewable resource. Interesting. We've had an amazing group of people. I thank all of you for all of your support and for attending, and hopefully for your continued support. I'd like to thank all the people who did the hard work. David Clark, Carling Hunt, Michael McKelvey, Rob Weber, who's out at the desk working away, LA, Stephen Clark, who, if you're at the awards tonight, you'll see him, and all of our crew back at the Hunt Group who scales this thing to make sure that we can bug the living daylights out of you to get your bums here because we think it's important. So thank you for your support and your patience. Please stick around for jugs of Caesar. I'm not kidding, there's jugs of Caesars. And we have the room till about 1 or 1:15, and then we're going to change it over and make it even prettier. So thank you very much.